without further ado, I want to introduce our esteemed panel today. We have some really awesome people who know a lot about board governance and the best practices around board governance, the policies around board governance. Also, we'll have a lot of resources. So as we're talking today, Andrea, my coworker, is going to be putting some links in the chat. We'll also probably send you a copy of the video as well as the links probably tomorrow. But she'll be putting those in real time in the chat as we talk. So be on the lookout for those. We'll also, if you can stay muted while we're talking, but we're going to have a Q&A at the end. So if you have questions, Andrea and the staff will be monitoring those questions, and we'll be asking our panelists those questions afterwards. You can also send a private message to Andrea Hill with your questions as well. So I want to introduce our panelists. The first panelist is Sonji Branch. She is a Standards for Excellence licensed consultant. She's a former CEO of a major nonprofit in Memphis. Also a Tennessee Nonprofit Network board member, and one of the best we have. So we are very, very excited to have her join today with her expertise. And she just became a licensed Standards for Excellence consultant. So she knows about all the resources that are available, and really knows her stuff, but also has the lived experience to back up her education in nonprofit management. Second person I want to introduce is Kim James. She's the executive director of Young Leaders Council. Young Leaders Council is in Nashville, Tennessee. They are doing board development for folks, I believe, ages 25 to 40. So really developing that new generation of board members that we're going to need to replace the ones we have, because we don't live forever, and we have term limits on our boards. Hopefully you have term limits on your boards. That might be a pet peeve that we talk about in our conversation. But we actually at Tennessee Nonprofit Network, we just got one of their board interns. You go through an extensive program with YLC, and then they are placed on boards as a non-voting intern. So we just got one from YLC who will be joining our March board meeting. So we're really excited about that. And then finally, I want to introduce Phil Trammell. He's the executive director of the Nonprofit Resource Center in Chattanooga, Tennessee. It's a fairly new nonprofit resource center in the Chattanooga area. They're doing a lot around board governance, doing a lot of trainings, technical assistance. If you're in the Chattanooga area or East Tennessee area, you definitely need to check out what he's doing. So those are our panelists. Very excited to have them, and we have I have a lot of questions for them, and I'm sure they have a lot to talk about. So I'm just going to jump in. And this is going to be pretty organic process. So let's start with the easy question for everybody. This is the easy question. We're going to get harder as we go. Why is good board governance essential for nonprofit success? And any of you three can jump in there first.
I'm happy to jump in here. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much, Kevin. Thank you so much to the team at Tennessee Nonprofit Network for having us. It's an honor to be here. So we all know that a good board member can elevate your organization. They can drive success for your agency. And of course, a strong board member they're bringing their talents, they're bringing their connections, they're bringing their energy, so that they can support the leadership and the staff in doing that important work. But at the same time, a bad board member can really upset the matrix, right? They can present a significant challenge, they can block progress, and often that is not even intentional. And so, board members are just people, and people inevitably bring all of their stuff with them. And so it's super important that we have good board members so that the leadership and the team of those organizations have the proper support to be able to move the mission forward.
Very well said, Kim, and thank you all for having us today. It really is a privilege to be here. I agree with everything you said. I also think you can think of your board members as thought partners, people that you can rely on for good advice, and sometimes we rattle things around inside of our heads that when they're said out loud, they don't sound quite as well as they did when they were inside our heads. And so I think having a board member or board members that you can consider a thought partner and that you're comfortable sharing ideas with is a very important part of what a board member can contribute to the success of an organization. And we've all got our experiences with bad ones, and I'm sure there's stories to be told by all of us. But I really think the bright spot, if you will, is that we've got some really good ones who can be consistent partners for us.
Ditto, really happy to be here with you all this afternoon. And the only thing that I will add is that we all know that, we are required to have boards, right? And so since we need to make the best of them, right? And so the point is, to Kim's reflection feels as well, it is our job as leaders and in partnership with the board to ensure that those experiences are positive and beneficial, mutually beneficial for both the board and the leadership of the organization.
Awesome. Thank y'all. So we're going to talk a lot about like what's not working, but I don't want to focus completely on just what's not working. I want to talk about what's working. So in y'all's communities, because y'all are in three very, very different areas of Tennessee, what are the bright spots you're seeing around board governance, and what successes are you seeing with board governance? So I'd love to hear about what's happening in Chattanooga, Memphis, and Nashville.
I'll jump in and kick us off because I know Kim is going to expound on this in pretty great detail. One of the things that I am appreciative of seeing locally in Memphis is greater exposure of young professionals, emerging leaders to the nonprofit sector and governance needs. I do think that we still have some work to do in order to ensure that these, again, emerging leaders, these young professionals, will be fully equipped to serve in these leadership roles with nonprofits. But again, we're at that point where they are, where we see greater opportunities for them to at least understand the role of the social sector in the Memphis economy and what some of those needs are.
And I'll jump in. Thank you, Sanji. And you're right. I mean, that's one of my favorite things about the work that we're doing, is because every semester we're seeing like this growing desire from young professionals to really lean into that work, right? So there's one thing to be a volunteer for a nonprofit organization. It's another thing to want to really commit to being a leader in that space and being willing to come and get the training to make sure that you can actually do it well. So when I came into this role about 3 years ago, of course, we're in the middle of a pandemic. A lot of organizations were super stressed because many of us went through leadership shifts around the same time. And of course, the board engagement at that point was really difficult. A lot of board members kind of took a pivot to focus on something different. And a lot of organizations were in need of new leadership, which really proposed an opportunity for YLC to really kind of lean in that partnership space, to bring young talent into those board environments. And so we're really excited that even though we had to do, of course, like a lot of people, that quick shift to virtual, we were still seeing a lot of desire to come through our program. And so we just try to find ways to take these lemons and make some lemonade with it, and be able to put really, really well-trained people out into the community to support our partners. And so many of those organizations that we partnered with have leveraged their YLC intern, who many of which go on to become full board members, to help solve some of those problems. And so when you have that fresh perspective and you have that new energy from someone who's just like, how can I help you? Right? You got this group of like-minded individuals who have hopefully the time and talents, and some of them even have the treasure. Not like me when I was their age, but at their point, they want to invest in the future of these organizations. And it's helping to keep our Middle Tennessee nonprofit community strong and resilient. And as we work together to try to figure out how can we solve some of these solutions, especially around diversity, equity, and inclusion, and just really getting the right people at the table, YLC is always happy to step into that place. So it gives me a lot of inspiration every semester to see it.
I'm just going to echo that for the others. I'm just really encouraged by the young professionals who are wanting to serve on nonprofit boards and the seriousness with which they take the role, meaning they're pursuing education and certifications and things that they would need to do to be prepared for that role. And I know that we in the space where we're trying to provide those resources to these people see that every day. So I'm encouraged by the fact that they don't just think it's a hobby. They're not just trying to get their name on a letterhead to advance their career, that they really are leaning into the education that they'll need to be successful as a nonprofit board member.
Thank y'all. Yeah, Phil, I had a board member one time at my last job who joined the board, and about a year in said, you know, Kevin, this is a lot of work. He honestly said, I really did this because I want to be top 40 under 40 in Memphis Business Journal. And I was like, you gotta leave this board. You gotta go. And he did, but I was like, this is not, I need something else. So yeah, it's great when people like want to get involved, and especially the younger folks, because we were definitely in a leadership transition, both on the board side and the staff side. So I have a focus question for Sonji. So Sonji, as a Standards for Excellence licensed consultant and a former CEO, you know board governance better than most. You have a lot of lived experience and that formal education about it. So what are some of the best practices Standards for Excellence recommends that are the biggest areas of growth for a lot of nonprofits right now, i.e. they're not doing it and they need to? What are some of those things, or what are some of the surprising, when you were going through that really intensive training around board governance, or I'm sorry, Standards for Excellence? What did you discover that were your aha moments, or your, oh gosh, we need more of this?
Yeah, so first, I want to encourage you all, if you are available on March the 13th, to register for that session, because I do believe that Amy will be able to shed some additional light on the Standards for Excellence. I think that it is a valuable resource, a valuable tool that can be better utilized across the sector. So please, yes, do that. And I would say, now shifting to the very specific question, I think that the greatest aha moment for me in understanding kind of where the opportunities for better practices, strengthening the practices in the governance space, really lie within that partnership between the board and the executive leader. And kind of thinking about my experiences as an executive leader, thinking about those standards for excellence, those partnership elements are very specific to the supervision, performance, compensation, and succession planning. And so as I think about, again, in retrospect, what could I have done differently in my role as an executive leader as it relates to that partnership? There are 5 questions that I really could ponder myself, and I think some of these might be relevant for some of you all on the call. And this is for both board members and executive leaders. Does your board really know what you do beyond the job description, beyond the highlight reels at the board meetings? Do they really know what you do? Do they really know what you experience on a day-to-day? Does your board chair, we know that your board chair is typically going to take the lead on the performance management aspect of the board's responsibilities, of that board relationship, that board and executive leadership partnership. Does your board chair, does their management values practices, does it align with your organization? And that's a really tough question to think about, because our boards, our governance committee, whoever's in charge of that aspect, again, of this partnership, they develop a performance rubric or whatever it is, but does it really align with the mission, the values, the performance, the performance practices of your organization? Does your board's compensation philosophy for you, the executive leader, align with your organization? As organizational leaders, we're mindful of the need to be competitive with our wages. And so we're monitoring those things, but are our boards really doing that for the executive leaders? Does your board really know your aspirations as a leader? Do they really know how you want to grow as a leader? And what are the things you are seeking to gain from them? And then lastly, do they really know how long you really want to do this? How much longer do I want to be in this role? Again, going back to those aspirations. And I think, when we consider where there could be opportunity for strengthening the partnership, even just around these questions, they could lead to better assurances in regards to compensation and supervision, coaching, development, ensuring that the leader has an executive coach, maybe. It's not a bad thing, right? And so I think that from, again, the aha moment for me, standards for excellence, is understanding that, again, that two-way street. How vulnerable and transparent are we as leaders to ensure that our board members know this? And then if we are vulnerable and transparent and ensuring that they know, how confident are our board members, are we with our board members that they're going to take that information and literally use it or take that information to help to support the growth, development, and more importantly, the ongoing longevity of the leader for the organization.
So thank you. But that I have a lot to think about with that, with all you said. So I'll turn it to Kim now. So Kim, YLC has a really robust professional development and board internship process for participants in your program. You're not just finding folks and doing that like board speed dating. And I have this like, you want to see my head explode. It's that board speed dating type, like meet somebody on the street or meet somebody at a networking event and the next day they're your board member. And we've talked about this in Memphis a lot about, how much professional development does a nonprofit board member, how much are they willing to commit to, and how much do they actually need? We spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on search firms to find our CEOs, but the CEO's boss is we meet them at a cocktail party, and the next day they're on board, and they're the ones who are actually responsible for the health of the organization. So why is board education and professional development important? And do you get any pushback about how much? I mean, that's a really robust program that you send people through. Do you get any pushback about how much is required?
Yeah. Yes, I have a not so funny story I can share with you about it, but I appreciate that, Kevin. But it doesn't happen often, but I did, I have gotten an email or two, and it's interesting how far people will go in the process before they tell you, oh, well, you're just asking for too much time. Well, hey, dude, why did you apply? And so you're either willing to make that commitment and really to invest in your future in this space, or you're not. And I think for us, it really isn't, it's how we have to vet people, because we take it so very seriously that we're putting these folks in your space to be able to support nonprofit leaders. And so if it's not something they take seriously, Kevin, we really don't want them to waste their time or ours. So that's my personal opinion on it. But when we think about the board members' role and the fact that they are supporting nonprofit executives to do this really important work, right? We're working in tandem to really meet the needs of the community. And seriously, just like any other environment, let's take nonprofit out of it. If you don't have the right people at the helm, then your goals aren't being met. The vision is getting blurry, and sometimes chaos can ensue. Right, we are just like any other organization, and what we know, and again, this is not unique to nonprofit organizations. Any organization that is supported by well-trained and experienced leaders is more likely to thrive. So that same sentiment is true for us in our nonprofit space. And because this work is so important and so many people in the community rely so heavily on it, sometimes it's really hard work, right? And we're doing it with minimal resources. And when we have somebody who knows their role, who's willing to bring innovative solutions to the table and help us make those critical connections so that we can more effectively and efficiently meet our mission, those well-trained board members can be crucial and help bring a better understanding of the role that they play in mission success. And so that's why having someone working in partnership, I wrote it down, I think it was Phil who said it, as a thought partner is really, really, really essential, instead of coming to the table of, well, I'm your boss. Well, hey, dude, are you really qualified to be my boss? Sanji just said it. Are you really qualified to be in that role? But if you come to the table not only trained, but compassionate and open-minded, and really focus on why we're both here. We're not here, nonprofit executives are not here because we get paid a lot. We're here because we're really passionate about the work and we care about the community. And so when we have somebody working in partnership, it really is a game changer for us.
I love everything you just said. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if you can't commit upfront to that professional development, then you probably can't commit to board service, especially when times get sticky and your CEO quits. You find out that your COO has been embezzling money. You have a client that goes to the newspaper about something horrible. Like those are the times, especially when you need those good board members. And I think everybody on this panel, probably most of the people in this Zoom room right now have had experiences where their board members were ill prepared for the challenges that were happening, and you go, gosh, I wish I just made them do more. Made them jump through a couple more hoops before they became my boss. Awesome, thank you so much. All right, Phil. So a lot of the people you're working with right now are smaller nonprofits struggling with good board governance. And when you have a volunteer-led board, or I'm sorry, a sort of board that has no executive director or staff, when you have these smaller organizations who a lot of the folks are starting these nonprofits and don't necessarily understand the ins and outs and nuances of board governance. What are some of the big challenges you're seeing, especially with the rural nonprofits and the smaller nonprofits that you're working with as it relates to board governance?
I think the biggest challenge we see every day is that the smaller nonprofits, no matter where they're located, rural or here, just finding board members, and the lack of thought that goes into how I choose or select the people I want to be on my board. So I'll echo what Sanjay and Kim have said about finding professionals to be on your board. But I would say most of the people that I see, they started a nonprofit because they saw a need that touched their heart. They went out and formed a nonprofit, and they got through the paperwork and realized they got to have 3 board members. So they asked their brother, they asked their sister, they asked the person that they play golf with, I'm starting a nonprofit, won't you be on my board? And I have to remind them when they come talk to us, that's your boss. And this may be your baby, but you just gave your baby to your spouse who might want to fire you at some point down the road. And guess what? They can. And so I think helping people think through the importance of the board as they form a nonprofit, that you don't need to be in a rush to get it done, that be thoughtful about who you choose to serve on your board. Think about what they can bring to the table, again, as a thought partner or someone who can provide some consistent oversight and checks and balances to what you're trying to accomplish. Because you probably didn't think that you were going to be running a small business with a special tax status when you started this thing. But guess what? You're going to be spending about half your time doing administrative things, and you'd really like to have somebody on your board who might be able to assist you with that. So that's what I see as the biggest challenge, is just creating a pool, if you will, of qualified professionals that they have to choose from so that they don't have to ask family and friends to serve on their board. And I know that's one of the things that we're trying to do here. We've created and are working with UTC and Chat State to create a certificated or a credit hour course for people to graduate, if you will, with a semester's worth of how to be a good nonprofit board member, so that we can place them in a pool, so that when a new nonprofit needs a board member, they can go to that pool knowing that person is a professionally trained nonprofit board member. And you just kind of have to find somebody in that pool that has a heart for your cause, so that you don't have to pick your boyfriend to be on the board. So, that's one of those things that we're trying to get people in the small and rural nonprofits who really don't have a lot of choices sometimes. So I don't hold them necessarily responsible, but we got to give them better choices than that.
Awesome. Yeah, we deal with a lot of nonprofits who have their moms on their boards. The founder has the mom is the treasurer, and that's always problematic. And it's hard to get foundation funding when they can look and see that your great aunt and your mom and your husband's on your board. Okay, so we talked about some of the highlights, good points, all that stuff. Let's talk about your pet peeves. And I could just go for an hour and a half myself just about pet peeves about board governance. But let's talk about like your individual the three of y'all's individual pet peeves that people need to know about, because a lot of times, like, we're talking about some of the negative stuff, but this is stuff that people sometimes don't even think about, you know, in board governance. So I'll open it up to y'all. Talking about pet peeves.
Well, I'll start. I think the biggest one is not showing up. Okay, if you've agreed to be on a board, you got to show up. And I can't tell you how many people, executive directors, that come to us and go, I've got this problem. I got this person on my board and they never show up. And what should I do? And of course, I always say, well, if we got to fire them, it's hard to fire a volunteer, but if they're not showing up, they're not helping you. So that'd be my biggest pet peeve is that if you've agreed to be on a board, you got to agree to show up.
I'm with Phil, and I tell you, I got a list, Kevin. So essentially, long meetings, people who meet for 2.5, 3+ hours. I struggle with that because these are volunteers. Very few people can give you 2+ hours of their life consistently, especially if we're meeting monthly or every other month. If we're having a productive meeting, why in the world why can't we get this thing done in an hour and a half? Why can't we? Just my pick. The other thing is meetings that could have been an email. I despise bullies of any level. And so when a nonprofit board is bullying the team, that doesn't sit well with me. We can't be thought partners. We can't be partners in any way if your intent is to come in here and terrify my team or try to terrify me. So, and then of course the micromanaging, and then when the nonprofit team and executives are treated like the work that they're doing is not enough, or somehow the work that we do in nonprofit is not as important because we're just this little nonprofit organization. Yeah, that never sits well with me. And I am so grateful that my board is not like that, because it makes my life easier and my actual team's life easier. So, but I've seen that, and it doesn't work well. I'll get off my soapbox.
I was liking your soapbox. I was cheering you on.
My nerves were bad, Kevin. It was bad.
Ditto to all that Phil and Kim have shared. The only thing that I would add to that is this issue of the pet peeve of quantity over quality. The number of times I've been in a meeting either with my board or on a board, and we need more board members. Why? Why do we need them? So that quantity over quality without truly assessing what the board needs, what skill set, what attributes are we missing? And then if we bring them on, are we going to have a clear plan for engaging them so that we can benefit from those skills, right? So again, quantity versus quality.
Yes, the big question is why. Does that mean when you're saying that, like that implies that your board isn't doing enough? So maybe you need to work on the board members you have, you know, set some expectations with them. So let's talk about board diversity for a second. So we've talked a lot about board diversity over the past few years, especially post George Floyd, and we really have seen a shift. But it seems like we're doing a lot of talking about it, but nobody's quite figured it out perfectly yet around board diversity and what that actually means, what that looks like, and what it takes to. And the research shows that it's actually harder than you think to diversify your board. And it's not just about finding people that are not like you to be on the board. It's really a full organizational process. So we're talking about it all the time. Things are not happening fast enough, you know, I think, for a lot of folks. Andre, do you have your hand up? Oh.
We have a question that is in the chat.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Let's save them for in a few minutes.
Okay.
Just hang on to that one. Yeah, keep a running list. Let's talk about like why do you think board diversity is not where it needs to be right now? You can talk about it any way you want.
Let me start with a story, if you don't mind. And some of you are from the Chattanooga area know the person I'm going to tell you shared this story with me, and I give her credit for it all the time. Her name is LaQuisha Ewing. And LaQuisha was talking about pancakes. And she asked a group of people that she was talking to about how they ate their pancakes. So how many people ate their pancakes on a plate? And, 99% of the people in the room raised their hand and said, I eat pancakes on a plate. And then she said, how many people eat their pancakes with a fork? And she said, about 99% of the people in the room raised their hand, said they ate their pancakes with a fork. And LaQuisha said, well, I'm not a big pancakes fan, but I grew up eating them in a bowl with a spoon. And the reason is it just made the syrup easier to get and to keep everything kind of together instead of running all over your plate. As that relates to diversity, equity, and inclusion, I would say we all think about inviting people to the table. And maybe what we ought to be thinking about is that the table isn't inviting to the people we're sitting at the table. And as an example, if I asked LaQuisha to come to my house for pancakes and I put a plate and a fork in front of her, she's not going to be comfortable with that. So I need to think about how we make the table more inviting to the people that we want to have included at our table. That it's not enough to just ask them to come. You got to find out from them what would make you comfortable and wanting to participate in this organization. I need your perspective and I want to know how you'd like to bring it. So that's my story, and I'll use that as a kickoff to this.
I absolutely love that, Phil. And if you don't mind, I would love to share that we have a diversity, equity, and inclusion week where we focus on that. And I'd love to share that. And I'm sure I won't do it due diligence like you just did, but I love that. But honestly, when it comes to DEI, I think a lot of people are still in a check the box mentality. Like you can just place a minority on the board, have them sit in the corner quietly, and you've done your job. So nobody wants to be a part of that. So that's the wrong way to go about it. And honestly, effective DEI is not a quick fix. So there's a systematic reason why these organizations lack representation. And so that has to be addressed first before that change can actually take hold and become lasting.
Nothing to add.
All right.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. So we've heard I was actually telling the panelists or some of the panelists a story before we got on about a nonprofit I was talking to yesterday about some over micromanaging board members that I was trying to help a nonprofit through that situation. And I had a board member one time in my last job that would with the annual fund letter would send it back to our director of development, circle everything in red that she didn't feel was the right, and then at one time even ask us to send out a updated annual fund letter to all of our donors because there was like 2 grammatical issues in it, without behind my back. And so I found out about it. I was like, no, we're not sending it out. We're a literacy organization, sure, but we're not doing that. So, but what we're hearing from a lot of nonprofits is post-COVID, there's one of 2 things are happening. One, the board is completely focused on something besides their board governance responsibilities, and they're way too busy. They're not showing up. They're not coming to the table. They're not doing their job. Or post-COVID, the boards are sort of overstepping into that the operations piece, the stepping on toes with the CEO, really, and not necessarily thinking through what a good CEO relationship is with their CEOs. So with seeing all that, how do y'all recommend that boards can strike a balance, especially knowing that like post-COVID things are a little bit off still? How can boards strike a balance between not micromanaging but really taking the lead on the strategy and the oversight responsibilities that they have?
So very quickly speaking to the micromanaging piece, I think that, again, going to a point that I made earlier, we need to better understand where there is either misalignment or alignment between the board, the executive committee, the board chair, kind of that person who is primarily kind of in that primary role of helping to support the CEO and, potentially, the CFO or the chief operating officer. There are some board relationships that exist between those roles as well. But, understanding where there is alignment or misalignment in philosophies on performance management. I think that, again, where I believe there is opportunity for boards to have a better understanding is, again, this is how our organization supports our leaders. These are the ways by which we support them in their growth, development, et cetera. These are the frameworks that we use in regards to performance management. And, sometimes we may even have to do a deeper dive in understanding our board members' experiences, because some of them may have never even managed a team. Let's just be honest. And now you have this responsibility on the board. So we need to do a better job of understanding where their skills are or not, and making sure that, we acknowledge that in those roles and responsibilities.
I agree with Sanju 100%. And I feel like when we all, because these moments are inevitable, these moments of conflict. And I feel like not being afraid to address them, just historically, not necessarily speaking about my current role, but professionally, what I've identified is just not being afraid to address them when that becomes an issue, when there's this air of mistrust in the environment. Really just trying to get to the bottom of it. Like, what is going on here? Can we have a civil conversation around it and come to the other side of that? Now, you may get to the other side of that and decide you're going to go ahead and clean out your office and I'm done with it. Or you may get to the other side of it and come to a place of peace and partnership in how you can work moving forward. So I've seen both of those sides, but I'm 100% what Sanju said.
Ditto to everybody, in that I always tell people the biggest thing I think I see where boards and leadership get separated is around the difference between aspirations and the resources to accomplish them. And you oftentimes have a board who have bigger aspirations than they are prepared to give you the resources to accomplish them. And that's where communication really needs to be important. Not only at the end when things are starting to get rough, but at the very beginning, saying, this may be our strategic plan, and here's where we want to be 3 years from now. These are the things we need to do right now. And that's where I'm going to focus my time and attention. And every once in a while, when the board comes along and says, we need to tackle this, then it's the leadership's responsibility to also say, but we didn't agree that that's what we were going to do in the first year. And if you want to do that now, that means we got to alter some things. It's just that constant communication and trying to keep that balance between what we want to become and what we've got in front of us in order to accomplish it.
Great answers, y'all. Thank you. So we can't talk about board governance without talking about the fiscal responsibilities of board members. How do we better help now board members understand their fiduciary responsibilities?
Well, I always start by telling them you do have liabilities. You can be sued. So if you're interested in knowing more, let's talk.
Yeah. And I'll add to that, just training, of course, helps. But I do find that really reiterating it during that orientation period, right? And then honestly, reiterating it before they actually accept that role. Because, we send stuff out, we pull it in policies and procedures, but what we know is people don't read. And so you have to really just say, okay, let's just quickly just kind of scan through this. I make sure that we cover it specifically in that orientation and make sure all expectations are clear up front. Now, I have the benefit of the fact that everybody who serves on the YLC board has gone through the YLC training. But, we forget things in life. And so sometimes I think just constantly making sure people understand the expectation and their specific role as the board leader.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so final question, the big question: how do we get our board members how to fundraise?
Yeah, you were not gonna let us escape this call without that question.
Absolutely not. No.
You absolutely not. So I do want to name that as we think about this in the context of the state of Tennessee, again, we're all across the state. That's a very nuanced question. And when I say that from the perspective of recognizing kind of just these shifts that are happening in philanthropy right now. And I think the reality is that it's going to get even harder for us to thoughtfully, strategically engage our boards in our fundraising efforts. Again, not for sake of we know the need is there, but we have to recognize as leaders that if we're going to successfully engage them in fundraising, that takes a significant amount of time for us as the leader to engage them in. It really, really does. And I think that's where we often find ourselves challenged. The leader's time, availability, commitment to working with the board with the fundraising, supporting the fundraising efforts. We have to be willing to commit the time. I'll end with that.
I'm happy to jump in a little bit on that as well. So I try to make it as easy as possible for my board. So like, here's the sponsorship information. Here's some suggested verbiage. Please add your own personality to this. And here's some contact information, or please use this for someone who you have, connections with that maybe we don't have connections with. But, in terms of my expectations, and then maybe this is because I currently serve on both sides of the table as a board member and also as the ED, of course, not board member for YOC, board member for Men and Hearts, but just understanding what I'm asking of them, and like Sonji said, just making sure I temper that a little bit, because I need my board support on helping to make those connections and maybe helping them set up those meetings. But I by no means expect them to write grants or, this isn't their full-time job. So I just try to temper my expectations and really try to make it as easy as possible for them. And I also shift that mindset. So we friend raise at YOC. Which of course is fundraising, but I consider it friend raising. It does two things. It makes me feel differently about the effort of development. And it also helps me when sometimes I don't get a yes on that friend request. So I'm just like, hey, I don't get so upset when it doesn't work out, because I think of it as I just got to do a little more to raise that friend. So, I mean, it's just kind of a different take on fundraising over here at YOC. So.
And I'll just add, I oftentimes tell people not to think of it as asking for money, because that seems to be an almost immediate, I don't do that. And I'm just not comfortable doing that. I try to frame it as a conversation with someone that you respect and admire about having help solving a problem. And money might be one of those ways to help solve that problem, but it might not be the only way. And so if you can think of yourself sitting down with someone that you're comfortable with, talking about, I have this problem and I need your advice or help in solving it, that leads to a much easier conversation about that might involve some money. So just trying to frame it as a problem, not as an ask.
And really half the time, or most of the time, it's just the board member helping you get the foot in the door. I'm happy to ask and get the rejection or whatever, or, talk about the details and the nuance of our organization, but just help me as a board member get in the door, and I'll do the hard work. You just leverage those networks that you have that are beyond me. Well, awesome. Thank you so much. All right, so we have some questions. I know, Andrea, what were the questions you've got so far for our panel?
Well, we only had one question that I saw, and it was a question for either Sonji or for Kim.
Okay.
And it asked about the 5 things that you believe that you shared earlier on, and they thought that they were really great points, but they wanted you to share them again. And Mitchell, if you do want to come off chat and just give context to your question, please do so.
And Andrea, which you said the 5 things, which 5 things?
We don't necessarily have, it was because it was so far back.
okay.
what it was in reference to, but I think you, Kevin may have asked you all a question about what are some things that you would suggest to board members or new board members. Well, we'll ask that question later and then
Okay.
see if we can, get a response back to them by email.
Okay. Unless they want to come off mute and tell us.
But if y'all have any other questions, drop them in the chat.
Yeah.
While we're if there's any other questions, do y'all have any funny stories to share? I have loads of board member stories. Other people's, mine.
That's for my
the
field
TNN. I
trip
won't
to
talk
Memphis,
about the
Kevin.
TNN one, but
That's-
I actually like our board right now, so we're good.
I'll save my funny story for when I take that field trip to Memphis.
Okay, I can't wait. Can't wait. Awesome. All right.
Yeah, I have one. I remember a board meeting when we were doing our chief operating officer was giving the finance report, our treasurer was giving the finance committee report. And we were highlighting the amount of we operated with a dashboard, so we were able to name that we had 9 months of cash on hand. We had the cash on hand, for the organization for 9 months, blah, blah, blah. And so I had a board member saying, why do we have so much money? I don't understand why we have so much money. But, okay. That was funny to me.
I don't think
Was he incensed on you? He was upset about it, or
Yeah, she was upset about it because she was of this mindset that one, that we shouldn't be building reserves and things of that nature. We should be putting all that. Yeah.
Okay.
we have a question in the chat. Andre, you want to take that one?
Sure.
Okay.
From Christy, are there any trends in onboarding board members? And this is regarding job descriptions or even contracts that lay out specific roles and responsibilities, including showing up X% of the meetings, doing advocacy, doing strategic input or a plan or fundraising.
Standards for excellence, absolutely. Yes.
Mhm.
Please join that call on the 13th so you can be you can be better informed about what those resources are. Absolutely. There are templates and all of that.
And if you are a member right now, you can get those early. You can just email Dorian Hines or Kate Moss on our Andre. We'll put both of their emails in the email them and say, hey, I'm looking for board responsibilities packets. I'm looking for the board information with standards. We will send you all of it for free. And a lot of it, oh, thank you, Dorian. And a lot of it is like we can just send you the Word format and you can just fill stuff in. Like we even have a bylaws template that you can use. So and any licensed standards for excellence consultant has access to all of those too. So if you hired Sanji as a consultant, she could actually provide those for you too in the planning process. So we have several licensed standards consultants in Memphis right now. We're going to expand our consultant directory across the state soon. More information about that soon. But those are excellent. Kim or Phil, did y'all have anything?
I was just gonna say, I've started to see some board service agreements that not only outline what expectations are that you would do, like showing up and those kinds of things, but they've started to be very specific about what your job is not. Okay, and say this is not a responsibility of a board member. You hire the executive director, but you don't hire staff, or you don't get in the weeds, is basically what it says. And they've been it's something new that I've started to see on some contracts.
All right. Thank you.
nothing to add.
Oh,
Go
okay.
ahead.
No, she said.
Okay, I have another question. It says, how would you better facilitate a board connection or placement process in which you are connecting individuals to a nonprofit?
I bet Kim has a lot to say about that.
So okay, so Andrew, say that again for me. So how would you better, how would you better facilitate?
Yeah, facilitate a program or an opportunity that will connect board members to a placement site. So do you have any kind of like clearinghouse opportunities or placement strategies around that?
We actually started and it's a part of our program. And of course, this is specific to people who are in YLC's program. We started a process where we bring people together. It's almost like a job fair, but a lot more fun. And so what it does is it allows people to build awareness for the work that they're doing on the nonprofit side, and then gives exposure for the people who go through our program so that they can see, they can talk directly to those representatives about the missions, programs, their board and volunteer needs. And so not every individual there is looking for a board member, but we find that even if someone comes to the table thinking they didn't intend to bring a person on their board, inevitably, anytime you're doing that type of direct and intentional connection, you meet someone who could add value for your organization. And so we find that really helps us, especially since that placement piece is a key element of YLC's training program. And then also one of the things that I'm really excited to share is that we actually receive funding to be able to create a board matching platform specifically for YLC's program participants. And so that's something that we're working on now. And it'll be available for use within our specific organization this year, starting in March. And so we hope to release it to more individuals and more to our alumni base, which is pretty substantial, by the 1st of next year. So we're trying to make that connecting opportunity a lot easier for people who really need it. And then we're trying to figure out how we can leverage that particular platform to maybe broaden that ability to place people on those boards. So.
And what I like about that, what you just said, is these are folks who went through an extensive 8 month.
Well, it's 11 weeks. 11 weeks.
11 weeks,
Kevin,
I'm
you
sorry.
trying to put me with people with 8 months? Doing.
Well, 11 weeks is a lot too. I'll that's a lot for somebody to do. But these are folks who aren't just like expressing interest. They have gone through a process. They have gone through a very good process before the matching has even started. So they're going to be. What I like about that is that your board members are going to be able to ask the right questions of that organization, not just the organizations looking for not asking questions of that board member. It's a two-way deal. And that's what I think is really cool about your program. I'm going to get somebody a lot of funding to do a really good board training and board process in Memphis, because I think it's so important. And I don't even care if TNN does it. We just, we have three big nonprofits that have closed recently, who I shan't name, although I was quoted in the newspaper about one of them. But the responsibility of all three of those lie at the foot of the board members for those organizations that have recently closed. One of them I'm really upset about because is a mentoring program, and it's exactly what we don't need to lose in Memphis right now. So that board placement piece and the board education is just so important. And Andre, do we have anything else?
No other questions.
Okay, awesome. Well, y'all, thank y'all so much for being on our panel. Thank you so much to those of you who joined us today to have this conversation. We're going to send you all the links and everything. If you didn't get a chance, Andre was like posting a whole bunch of links in there. All of them are great. You can save the group chat. Actually, there's a little button at the bottom where you can save the chat, but we'll also be emailing you as long as you registered for this. We'll be emailing you the links as well as the video of this. It'll also be on YouTube probably by the end of the day. So thanks for joining us. If you have additional questions that you have questions about board governance, email us, and we will either get you some Standards for Excellence information. We will connect you with a licensed Standards for Excellence consultant. We will email Kim and Phil and Sanji and ask their opinions. We will get you the information you need. That's what we're here for, and that's what we want to do for the nonprofit sector in Memphis, or I'm sorry, in Tennessee. Keep forgetting we're statewide now. In Tennessee. So thank you all so much for being here, and we will see you next time.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Sanji and Phil.
Right back at you.